What is up, NBA fans? Welcome to the NBA Outlet, presented by Off the Glass. I'm your host, Nick Fay. With me, as always, Kory Waldron and special guest, Jeremy Freed. Happy New Year to everybody out there. Happy New Year to you, too, as well.
Yeah, Happy New Year, Nick. Great to be here. Excited for a wonderful year of basketball with OTG and the NBA in 2019.
Yeah, happy New Year's to Nick and Jeremy and everybody, all the listeners out there, subscribers and followers of OTG Basketball. Appreciate everybody, and this is how I would like to start off 2019 with a podcast.
Yeah, first thing, pretty much in the morning. I don't know about you guys, but I haven't been up very long. So it's getting the year started with some NBA talk, some NBA Outlet. We're going to give you New Year's resolutions for all 30 teams. Just a quick reminder, you can check us out, iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, OTGBasketball.com, Dash Radio, and YouTube. But let's get right into it. We'll start with the Eastern Conference, right in the Atlantic Division. Boston Celtics, what do they want to – what's their resolution going into this year?
I mean, they got to find the 2018 version of Jaylen Brown and the 2017 Gordon Hayward. Those guys are going to be really key in terms of them, being not just a good team in the East, but a contender on a league-wide scale. And those guys are not back where they need to be, so they need to really commit to making sure that they get the best out of Jaylen Brown and get Gordon Hayward, not so tentative, back to where he was pre-injury.
My resolution is for them to shake up the roster, and that's make a trade. I'm not saying it's got to be earth-shattering, but I think moving a Terry Rozier, maybe even seeing what you could possibly get for Jaylen Brown, because Marcus Morris has been incredible this year for them, having career shooting split. I think he's shooting like 50 and 40 from the field. At least he was a couple of days ago. So for me, it's the Celtics just mixing up the roster because they really haven't been able to get it going. We've seen stretches of them figuring it out, but overall, it's been pretty disappointing.
Yeah, both great points. I mean, I think Jaylen Brown getting going would be huge for this team because we saw last year he was so good for them, their best player at times. Now, also the trade, you could see that too. They have a couple contracts they'd like to get rid of, maybe bring in some role players. So definitely going to be interesting 2019 for the Celtics, considering it wasn't super successful first half of the year. But the Brooklyn Nets.
Well, the Brooklyn Nets this year need to make sure they continue to finish their games. If you look at how they've played so far this season, and you look at their record, especially having lost their best player in Caris LeVert, if they could finish their games a little bit stronger, then they would be, not in ninth place in the Eastern Conference, but someplace, up around six. They had this, awful stretch where they crashed and burned in the fourth quarter of a good half a dozen games. That if they can consistently turn those losses into wins, then they're going to find themselves competing for a playoff spot this year.
Yeah, great point, Jeremy. That would have been my second resolution, but my resolution is for them to get healthy and to stay healthy. You mentioned Caris LeVert's injury. That team was really starting to take off, and he was starting to play really good basketball. Then he went down. They kind of lost themselves for that stretch of games, and now they're kind of figuring things out, and they're right back in the playoff hunt. So for me, it's get healthy and stay healthy.
Yeah, both great points again, guys. Definitely Jeremy playing clutch, finishing off games. That 8-game losing streak, definitely a couple games where they really blew it. And like you said, Kory, a lot of guys injured. Caris LeVert, Allen Crabbe, Rondae Hollis-Jefferson just got hurt. But what I'd like to see them do in 2019 has been an issue for them for the last few seasons is force more turnovers. It's more aggression defensively, more energy, more effort. I think that's an area where they can improve and it would drastically improve their defense. But the other team in New York, the New York Knicks, what do they need to what's their resolution?
Well, for me, they need to tank successfully. It's totally the way that New York does it is that they have these bad teams, but they can't go all out for the badness, even though their fan base would support it. I think they think that the fans would rise up against them if they had a truly awful team. But I think the fans in New York are knowledgeable enough to know that if you are actively terribly bad instead of just mostly bad, then it improves your draft pick, and then you can get even better players to turn around more quickly. So the Knicks need to make sure that they don't accidentally, become just, bad instead of really bad, and really go all out to try and get one of these, players who are going to be at the top of the draft. I don't think it's a super deep draft, but I think there's some real star power at the top, and they need to make sure that they don't screw that up.
Yeah, as you mentioned, the Knicks are obviously they're in rebuilding mode. They're trying to figure things out. So my resolution for them to play Frank Ntilikina. He's gotten a couple coaches do not play decisions. And, this is – you're supposed to be trying to lose, as you just mentioned, Jeremy, trying to figure out who's a part of the future. And I'd like to see if Frank is a part of the future. I'd like to see him crash and burn rather than sit on the bench and not play.
Yeah, again, guys, great points. Definitely want to fill in the tank mode. They've done a pretty good job starting to rest Ennis Cantor and not play him as much, but I agree. I think Frick Ntilikina needs to play more. All the young guys, just so you can see what you have, like Kory mentioned, going to this next year. The Toronto Raptors.
The Toronto Raptors, for me, I think need to get a little more out of OG Anunoby. I think that they've obviously had a very successful season thus far, but their ultimate success is not going to be gauged on I think what they do just in the East. But if they can get out of the East and make it to the finals, they need to make sure that their long players are going to be able to rein in most likely that Golden State juggernaut. So I think for them, they need to experiment more with their long lineups, and that's going to be some more OG Anunoby than we've seen thus far this year.
Yeah, my resolution for the Raptors is kind of like a two-parter. One would be to add more perimeter shooting, and also a part of that would be shooting more effectively from deep. The Raptors rank 25th in three-point percentage, which is obviously in the bottom 5 of the league, and this is an elite-level team, great defense. And if this team starts to become an effective, they shoot the 5th most threes in the league, and they're shooting 25th percent-wise. So you would think if they raise that number up, this team becomes even more lethal than they already are.
Yeah, that's a really good stat right there. Definitely improve the three-point shooting. And like you said, Jeremy, OG, getting him going where he was such a big piece last year and there was so much hype around him, you haven't really heard his name quite as much this year. What about the Philadelphia 76ers?
Well, I think the 76ers need to keep tinkering with that roster. I don't think that where it currently is in a place that puts the Sixers at the top of the East. So I think there's still some more trades to be made. If that means moving on from Markelle Fultz, I think he's their biggest chip. In terms of something that can generate value in return, but isn't putting anything on the floor right now that's going to be a thing that they're losing in terms of trading him out. I think that Philadelphia, while improved since the Jimmy Butler trade, is just not yet where they need to be in terms of being a competitor, on a league-wide scale.
Yeah, I mean, for the 76ers, you make a great point, Jeremy. This team definitely has more tinkering to be done with the roster. There's still not a lot of depth here on this 76ers roster. Yeah, they got the big-name talent in Jimmy Butler. But you look outside of Embiid, Butler, Redick, and Simmons, I think the next guy with the most points isn't even playing. That's Markelle Fultz at 8.2. So some depth for them would sincerely help them. And also just taking care of the ball more. They're 25th in the league in giving up turnovers, a little bit sloppy at times, but definitely adding more talent to the roster is needed.
Yeah, I think definitely improving that bench is something they'll be looking to do in 2019, especially when that trade deadline approaches and that buyout market. What about moving on to the next division, Southeast, Charlotte Hornets?
I think the Charlotte Hornets need to mix up their rotations. I mean, they've been very consistent in terms of, who they've been, starting and playing together. And it's kind of it's not necessarily a motley crew, but it's a little striking when you look and see, like, are they still starting, Marvin Williams? That's a little surprising to me. They're still trotting out, Cody Zeller with the starting 5. Nick Batum, makes certainly enough money, but it's surprising to me when they have players of the caliber, Malik Monk. I think Miles Bridges, ranks up there in terms of a lot of people's, most exciting and potential filled rookies. I suppose that Charlotte, they're 6th in the Eastern Conference, but that's at 18-18. That's in some ways the definition of mediocrity. I think they need to give more, minutes and more opportunities to young players and see if they can break out of this and maximize, what is, by far the best Kemba Walker season, without having nothing to show for it besides the first round burnout.
Yeah, my resolution for the Hornets is to make a roster move of any kind to bring in some help for Kemba Walker. Only 3 players on the Hornets are averaging double-digit points per game. Kemba at 25, Jeremy Lamb at 15, and then Malik Monk at 10. Then everyone else is under 10. Williams, Parker, and Zeller all with 9. This team needs more offense. As you mentioned, they're in the middle of the East right now. And, Kemba Walker is going to be a free agent. Me and Nick have mentioned this numerous times on the podcast. That you got to start showing Kemba that you're going to try and win, and he's having a career year. And if you're not going to better this roster, then I wouldn't be surprised if he decides to leave. So right now, for the Hornets, going all in.
Yeah, and there's no lock they're going to make the playoffs. I mean, the East is pretty bad, but there's a chance they can miss. And also, Jeremy mentioned the rotations. It looks like Zeller broke his hand, so he's going to be out for some time. And Jeremy Lin has a hamstring strain. So we're really going to get to see some of these other pieces on the team and see what they can do. And this stretch will kind of determine a lot, I think, for the season. What about the Atlanta Hawks?
The Atlanta Hawks, I think, they need to find a taker for Kent Bazemore. I mean, he's been playing well, and I think he's generated some value, even though he's got a big contract. I think they should be able to find a taker for him, and just continue to give minutes to the kids. They've had a good stretch of basketball recently. They've climbed all the way up to 12th in the East, which I think is their high point since the season really started. They're 5-5 in their last 10 games. I think that's got to be their most successful 10-game stretch of the season. And that's because they've gotten some really good performance out of Trae Young, really good performance out of John Collins. This is a team that has some pieces for the future. So they just need to make sure that they're not creating their own obstacles with pieces like Bazemore, who, while playing well, is not part of the long-term picture.
Yeah, for me, when it comes to the Hawks, my resolution is to acquire more assets. And the way to acquire more assets is by moving guys like Kent Bazemore, Jeremy Lin, and Dwayne Dedmon. All three guys, I think at some point in time, will probably be moved this year. You could even make the case maybe even Alex Len could get moved, depending on how they see him going forward. He's had a really good revival up in Atlanta so far this year. For me, it's just moving some of these guys and getting more assets.
Yeah, it's a combination, moving the guys, getting more assets, getting more minutes for the young guys, I think is ideal. Washington Wizards, maybe the most interesting team going to 2019 considering their situation.
I mean, they have to blow it up. I think they had to blow it up before, John Wall got injured. But especially now, I mean, I don't know what there is, to be gained in terms of putting any effort forth in a season where you're 14-23, and really not within any expectation of making the playoffs. I mean, suppose there's Ewing theory candidacy. You lose your intrepid captain in John Wall, and then you bounce back and go on a run to make the playoffs. But that might even be worse for the Wizards, and showing how useless John Wall is. And then he becomes, if he's not already, the biggest albatross in basketball. So I think they just need to tear this one down to the studs, and no time like the present.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Jeremy. When John Wall went down, I immediately thought it's over. Like, you got to blow it up. Bradley Beal, bringing some assets for him. If you can move Otto Porter Jr., move him as well. You're not going to be able to move John Wall probably, but if you can move some of these all-stars or borderline all-stars, some of these veterans they have on the roster, like a Jeff Green or Markieff Morris, you can maybe go into next year with John Wall and a completely fresh slate and just kind of rebuild around Wall, because you're probably not going to be able to move him.
Yeah, getting some young pieces around them are like almost a retool. I think it's a weird resolution, but they just need to kind of give up on the season. Miami Heat, though.
I think Miami Heat, need to see if they can turn, any of their quarters into a dollar, and see if they can, string together, some of those, I suppose, mildly interesting players that they have, and make them into, a big player. I don't know if they have a particular person in mind. Maybe somebody like the Minnesota Timberwolves are interested in moving on from Andrew Wiggins, and, they'd be willing to take a couple pieces, to do that. Obviously, those teams are talking a little bit about Jimmy Butler. So maybe, there are some pieces that they're still interested in on the roster of the Heat that they would take instead for Wiggins. And then, Miami could, see what they could do there. But it's such a weird collection of talent that they have right now. I think it's all, overpriced, for what it is. And that team is not going anywhere as it's currently, constituted. So they need to make some sort of move, maybe even just a lateral one, but something to change up that roster.
Yeah, my resolution is as well a roster shake-up of some sort. I mean, Tyler Johnson making $19 million, Goran Dragic making $18 million, James Johnson is falling apart making $14 million. One of these three guys I would like to see moved. I think it obviously would help them cap-wise. And this team is kind of stuck being somewhere between the 10 and 6 seed range in the East. And it's been like that since LeBron's left. So I think now it's time to finally, Wade's last year, start looking towards post-Wade, even though Wade's been gone in the past already. But look for what's to come. And I think Jason Richardson's a nice building block, or Josh Richardson, excuse me, is a nice building block to
Going
start
back.
with. Yeah, right, wrong Richardson.
But yeah, honestly, just the Heat kind of figuring out their situation, like you guys mentioned, so many contracts, so many different things, like trying to find a team and roster that really works. Another team in Florida, though, the Orlando Magic.
I think the Orlando Magic need to see if as those trades start flying, if they can get their hands on a competent, and I'm not sure necessarily who that point guard is going to be, but DJ Augustin certainly isn't it. They have a lot of young players. They have a lot of young athletes. I think in some ways perhaps they've overperformed a little bit this year on the strength of Vucevic and some of the outcome that they're getting from him. But I think this team has a real future. Between Gordon and Isaacs and Bamba, getting up and down the floor, being a really fast, athletic team. But they need Triggerman to do that, and DJ Augustin is not that person. So I think they need to be really active in seeing if they can find someone to really make their offense go. And if they do that, then they might actually, have a little more future to look forward to, rather than this current, cycle of not the worst team in the league, but not a playoff team either. That real purgatory. Not even as high as the Miami Heat 6 to 10 range, but kind of a 9 to 13 slog year in year out.
Yeah, my resolution for the Magic is obviously finding a point guard is a big part of that, but it's just getting rid of some of these vets. Evan Fournier is 26. You can probably move DJ Augustin. He's been having a career year, maybe even Jonathan Simmons. I would just like this team to start moving some of the vets to see some of these younger guys play. Jonathan Isaac's only averaging 24 minutes per game. I don't even think Mo Bamba's playing a ton. So for me, I think it's just time to start moving this to a different direction. As you mentioned, Jeremy, this team has been in the same part of the Eastern Conference for what feels like a decade. And I just think it's time that we finally start to rebuild. And it starts with getting some of these younger guys more time.
Yeah, they've been pretty much stuck here since the Dwight trade, and they haven't really been able to get back in the playoffs and, create a splash. Definitely some different avenues for them to explore. The Central Division, Kory's Indiana Pacers.
I think the Pacers similarly need to upgrade the point guard position. Darren Collison and Corey Joseph together, I think, are averaging about a 16 and 10. And with Oladipo in the backcourt, I mean, he's taking on a lot of that distributing responsibility as well. But this is a perimeter league right now, and I feel that with Tyreek Evans not really being all that I think they hoped he would be when they picked him up in free agency, that they just need to provide Oladipo with a little more help in the backcourt. Obviously, Kory watches a lot more Pacers than I do, but I don't see him getting the support that he needs there. And I think they have some interesting pieces in the front line that's really I think the weak point of kind of their rotation right now is what they're doing at the point.
Definitely the point guard is probably the one position we're looking to upgrade, I think, for certain. There's already been a lot of rumors about Collison maybe getting moved. My resolution is pretty much alluding to what you were saying, is adding more talent around Oladipo and Turner. Because I think now, even though Miles Turner broke his nose yesterday, he's pretty much solidifying himself as the second best player on this Pacers team between the rim protection and his newfound confidence in actually scoring the ball. But with that said, adding talent for me would be 3-point shooting. The Pacers are 29th in the league in 3 points attempted, but they have the 5th highest percentage. They're just not shooting enough. They don't have a lot of shooters on this roster. So for me, it'd be adding some sort of perimeter shooting. Doug McDermott was a nice start, but I mean, there's no shock that Doug McDermott can't play a ton of minutes because of defensive liability reasons. So I would like to see them add some sort of perimeter threat.
Yeah, I think you guys are spot on. I also would say, maintain the defense they've been playing over the last month because it's been incredible. And Kory mentioned Miles Turner has been on another level, probably getting himself into the Defensive Player of the Year, at least talk. I don't know if he'll win it, but he's really improved a lot in that aspect of his game. Milwaukee Bucks, though.
I don't know that there's so much that Milwaukee needs to do. I think they need to, stay the course. They are leading the East right now. They're having, I think their best season in some time. They're leading the NBA. They have the best record in the NBA. I might think about, playing the starters together a little bit more. I mean, I think everybody's minutes are down, but they're leading the league, so I don't know if it's a bad thing. I just think, when it comes to playoff time, they're going to have to put a little more weight, on the shoulders of the starting five. So they might start ramping them up and preparing them for that workload. I think Giannis is averaging his fewest minutes in 3 or 4 seasons at this point. And when it comes to the playoffs, he's going to be, ratcheted up well into the 40s, I expect. And I think he can handle it. But it's a big jump from, 30, I think 1 or 2, which is where he's at right now, to tack on 10 minutes a game. So you just want to make sure that you start, I think, kind of ramping up that workload as they get closer, so it's not too jarring of a switch.
Yeah, there's really not a lot to dislike right now about the Milwaukee Bucks. The one resolution I would have is just to force more turnovers. They're actually only 27th in the league in creating turnovers. They only get 13 turnovers a game, which is surprising because this team has a lot of good defenders, a lot of length. For me, maybe just be trying to turn the ball over more or getting more turnovers, creating more turnovers, and getting out more in transition. We know how this team likes to get out and run, and they're shooting the second most threes a game in the league.
Yeah, there's not really much to say about the Bucks except just kind of keep building on what they've done so far. I think they've been really good. A lot of us thought they would be good, but maybe not this good. So just continuing to maintain that in 2019. Chicago Bulls.
The Chicago Bulls should avoid a mutiny. I think that's, I think resolution number one. Not actually, throw Jim Boylan out on the street. But they need to make sure that they are giving, more minutes to their young people. Now that Markkanen's back, make sure that they're giving him, lots of opportunities to shine. I think that Markkanen, Wendell Carter front court is really promising. I think that's, in some ways kind of the future of what a lot of people are going to be trying to do in the front court there between, Markkanen, who's got the range, and, Wendell Carter, who, can bang, but as well, is a multi-talented player. So, make sure that and as much as you like a guy like Justin Holiday, I mean, he shouldn't be, leading the team in terms of, minutes and things like that. Get out from underneath Jabari Parker, who doesn't have anything really going there. Make sure that Chris Dunn gets all the opportunities now that he's back from injury. But really see what they have there in a number of very highly selected players, and if they can get them to gel and provide, a core for the future.
Yeah, my resolution is to figure out what pieces of this Bulls team you can have going forward. And another side resolution would just be for Zach LaVine to play some sort of defense. Because, this kid can score. We know he can score. He's put up some really big numbers this year, but there's just nothing on the defensive side of the ball. And obviously, that's a big issue with this team in general. It's a big reason why Jabari Parker is no longer on the rotation, no longer on the team. Well, you know what I mean. He's not on the team, really. So for me, it's Zach LaVine becoming a more complete player, and then them just figuring out which one of these guys, which group of guys they can go forward with.
Yeah, you guys are pretty much spot on here. Cleveland Cavaliers.
I'd say if it's not nailed down, then get rid of it. The Cavs are so bad. They're not, particularly interesting. Even, I put out an article recently about who are they actually wanting to hang on to, and I came up with 3 people, but I don't even know if those 3 people are representative of anything. I mean, who are their best long-term prospects? Osman, Nance, and Sexton probably. What's the ceiling on any of them? I don't know if it's even like the 3rd best player on a championship team. So, it's really a roster that's pretty devoid of talent. So I would just be moving things around in any way, shape, or form. See if they can, take a flyer on previously highly drafted and people who are not turning out. The Pistons, for instance. People like Stanley Johnson. Luke Kennard obviously is still very new, but maybe like a Stanley Johnson's been in the league a few years and hasn't really done anything, and could maybe benefit from a change in scenery, and could provide the Pistons, with some of the players on the Cavs roster who are potentially better suited to help a team that's in the midst of a playoff run or competing for a spot than part of any actual rebuilding effort. So, just keep the phone lines open.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Jeremy, on keeping the phone lines open. For the Cavaliers, it's all about acquiring assets. We know how bad the rebuild went when they first lost LeBron James, and they didn't really start this one off much better, trying to compete right away. But for me, it'd be trying to move Kevin Love when he gets back. For do the best you can. I don't really know what the value is on Kevin Love. I think Jordan Clarkson is the guy I would look to move. Maybe even Rodney Hood. But for me, it's just moving some of these guys, getting some assets, and moving forward. As you mentioned, Jeremy, there's nobody on this roster I look at and say this could be the number one or a number two option on the championship team one day. Third would even be kind of stretching it for me. For me, it's just getting more assets.
Yeah, bringing the assets, work towards the future. That's kind of what the mindset is in Cleveland. Detroit Pistons.
Well, as I said, I mentioned the Detroit Pistons when we were talking about the Cavs just now, but they need to, beef up, the support system in that. I think that, Blake Griffin and Andre Drummond are an unconventional, at least in the modern NBA, 1-2. They would have been a fantastic 1-2 punch in the NBA, 30 years ago. But for now, they're strong enough to, I think, carry a team to the playoffs. But Reggie Jackson, I think they need to, get anything if they can to get Reggie Jackson out the door. But then, who's, their third or fourth best player, depending on where you rank Reggie Jackson, Reggie Bullock. That's not the third best player on a competitive team. So they need to make some moves. They have struck out with a lot of picks, recently, and they just have no real functional depth. I think their starting five is not as strong as it needs to be, and 6, 7, 8. The first guy's off the bench either. So they need to make some moves, and they might as well. I don't think that there's anything to be gained by not making the playoffs. I think this is a team for now. So they need to make some moves around the edges to strengthen that Blake Griffin, Andre Drummond core.
Yeah, just look at some of the team stats for the Pistons. They're 29th in blocks, 29th in steals, 28th in assists, 21 in rebounds, 29th in three-point percentage. This team's a mess. I think moving Reggie Jackson would probably be the best thing this team could do. Obviously, Reggie Jackson just isn't the same guy. And for the money he's making, he's really locked up this roster because I think you can build around, even though they're not traditional, obviously. Griffin and Drummond, you can, I think, at least have on your roster and be competitive, but you can't be paying Reggie Jackson $17 million for what he's giving you. So if I'm the Pistons, as I mentioned, I think on the show, Nick, probably the last few weeks, they just need to add more offense because there's just not a lot of offense on this roster, and they're not going to be going much of anywheres without any.
Do you guys think anyone will have interest in Reggie Jackson?
Hell no.
Some of these teams, I talk about needing a point guard, would Orlando be worse off with Reggie Jackson than they are with, DJ Augustin? I'm not sure. I wouldn't, sick him on your Pacers, Kory. But there are teams that, are getting less from their point guard position than Detroit's getting from Reggie Jackson. I just don't think Reggie Jackson's, a good fit for them at all. I think he had a little success when it was, he and Drummond in a two-man game. But I think, the way that the offense goes through Blake Griffin now more than it does through Reggie Jackson, I don't think that's something that he does well with. So a place where he, was really given the keys to the car, I think, could be a better situation for him.
Yeah, definitely something to keep an eye on, especially for one of the teams who really, really need a point guard. Obviously, health is a concern with Jackson. Moving over to the Western Conference, though, Memphis Grizzlies.
I think the Memphis Grizzlies need to, as we continue to talk about point guards, check and see what Mike Conley's value is. The Grizzlies, I think Jaren Jackson was a fantastic pick. Marcus Gasol and Mike Conley continue to kind of defy, time with how they, are aging gracefully. But I don't think the Grizzlies are going anywhere. And the Grizzlies are, a small market team. I don't think that, if the grit and grind era ends, then, do we worry about the future of basketball in Memphis? But those are players that right now have value and are, decreasing in that value. So if they want to get something for them instead of just watching them, age out and then retire and then be left with, kind of nothing going on, then, they should see if they can get something out of them while they can.
I'm right there with you. Obviously, it was a good story seeing them be successful early. They had hopes of 50 wins this year going into the year. And it looked like for a little stretch of time that they may actually do that, but after they come back down to earth, Marc Gasol, who had tremendous numbers at the start of the season, has kind of come back down to earth. And as you said, these guys are getting older. Me and Nick have said this for at least all last year, for most of last year. You got to move on from these guys, especially Marc Gasol. I mean, he's 34. He played solid early, but what does he look like at 35 or 36? It can't be better than what he is now. I agree. It's time to sell off some of these pieces. You're already stuck with Chandler Parsons. So for me, it's trying to look towards the future. The grit and grind needs to change.
Yeah, and talking grit and grind, I found one interesting stat. The Grizzlies are second to last in the league in rebound percentage, which is not something you usually associate with them. So it's not necessarily working out. They're just not the same team they were. It would make sense to kind of evaluate what they have. The Houston Rockets, a team that's been kind of hot of lately thanks to James Harden.
Yeah, it always disappoints me when the Rockets play well. But to their credit, and or at least to James Harden's credit, they have been playing well. They've finally sorted things out. If by sorting things out, I mean James Harden just goes to the free throw line 27 times a game and scores 40 points on like 8 makes. So it's working out for them, but they just need to go all in, I think, really is the thing. I mean, I don't think that the window is going to open wider after this year. I think the injury situation with Chris Paul just lays bare how thin their margin of error is. So if they can make moves to make this year's team the best it can be, to give them the best chance of maybe knocking off Golden State and getting over that hump into the NBA Finals, and they should go for it. But I don't think that this is a roster, as well as they've been playing recently, that can compete, and they need to get it to that spot, because it's not going to get any easier in the 2019-2020 years. It's going to become more and more challenging, even as good as Harden is, to compete for a title.
Yeah, James Harden, just want to throw a stat out there. Over the last 10 games, he's averaging 40 points per game over the last 10. He's been incredible, and obviously, as you mentioned, James Harden really has to will this team to most victories, at least over the last stretch without Chris Paul. For me, the resolution is to acquire talent. The 3 names I have down are Kent Bazemore, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and then even J.R. Smith. I just think this team needs to add a little bit of offense. I mean, J.R. Smith is literally the last guy I would go for, but I just think it kind of fits with their system and what they're trying to do in Houston. But for me, it's acquiring more talent. As you mentioned, Jeremy, their window is not getting any wider. I actually think their window was simply just last year. I already think their window was past. But for me, they got to add more talent. They really want to get back in that title window.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that they, I'd say that their window is necessarily closed 100%. Harden's just too good to say that, a team with him on it and the way that he's playing, just doesn't stand a chance. But they do need to do something. I don't think that this team, as it's currently constituted, has an open window. But I would say that they can open it, depending on the decisions that they make.
Yeah, right now the window's probably cracked, and they need to add another piece to kind of pull it all the way open and have a real shot. I think you guys brought up great points. The San Antonio Spurs, another Texas team.
Whereas I want the Rockets, or at least think the Rockets should go all in, I think the Spurs have to blow it up. And it's tough because it's Pop's, it's one of Pop's last years, maybe Pop's last year, overall. And depending on what they know inside the Spurs organization, if they know that it is potentially, I mean, they're not going to gut the team there. But it's not a good team. I mean, I know they're in the 8th spot right now, but I don't think that does anything. That's all, of course, super perilous. I mean, there are half a dozen teams that are all within a win or loss of each other there, more than half a dozen teams. But it's just, as much as you look and you say, well, LaMarcus Aldridge, DeMar DeRozan, aren't those like 2 top 25, 2 top 30 or so players? Can't they do something with that? I just don't see this team as having, any future. And so I don't know what the point is in, playing it out to get an 8 seed or something like that, to not make it, out of the first round.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, actually, on blowing up for the Spurs. I mean, not simply blowing up. For me, I just have trade LaMarcus Aldridge. Aldridge is expiring at the end of this season, and personally, I don't see much value in bringing back 34-year-old Aldridge, just not in the current NBA. And he hasn't been as good this year as he was last year for San Antonio, whether that be because DeRozan's now in the offense or whatever the case may be, but he just hasn't been as effective. So for me, it'd be trying just to get some more pieces in. As you mentioned, we don't really know the status of Pop. Is he coming back next year? Could this be his last year? But this is one of the worst teams at three-point percentage. They're kind of like going against the grain of the NBA, and it's time to come at the times.
Do you guys think anybody would have interest in Aldridge?
I'd have to think about who that team would be. I mean, he's obviously still a good player. I mean, he's a 20-9.
Yeah.
As much as he's a center, he's not a totally immobile center. I mean, he's on the more mobile end of the spectrum. But I mean, this is a guy who I would say was really traditionally a power forward, and just everybody's getting sized up, and now he's a center. So I mean, there's certainly could be a team that would benefit from having a guy like LaMarcus Aldridge join their roster. I mean, OTG's got a little trade series coming up. Maybe that's something for us to sort out.
Yeah, it's a real possibility, especially because Kory mentioned the expiring contract. And obviously, Aldridge doesn't necessarily have a ton of time left. But over to Dallas, probably one of the more surprising teams this year.
Well, I think that going back into the Houston direction, that Dallas is another all-in. I mean, of course, they had to trade next year's first rounder to make the move up to get Luka, and they'll make that trade 10 times out of 10 with the revelation that he has been in his rookie year. But since there's no advantage to them not making the playoffs, then I would absolutely, go for it. I think they have some things that they can do. I think potentially they can make a move with Wesley Matthews in order to improve the team. They might, find, some takers for, Dennis Smith. There's been a lot of discussion about Dennis Smith and, whether he fits in with Luka and what they're doing there. That obviously he is still a very young player with a lot of upside, that he might be able to get a big piece coming back. So I think that there are moves that Dallas can do, and that Dallas should do, because they should, absolutely try and make it into the playoffs. And from there, see what happens. But that this is a team that does absolutely no favors to themselves by heading towards the lottery, which they're not going to participate in.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. For me, it's Dallas moving some chips in. I think that involves moving Wesley Matthews, and if you can move Dennis Smith Jr., get some win now pieces, why not? As you mentioned, there's no draft pick. You're not playing for anything besides the playoffs. So for me, I'm right there with you on Dallas.
Yeah, I think they also could work on themselves a little bit and clean up the turnovers. I believe they're bottom 5 in that area too. Over to the New Orleans Pelicans, though.
Oh, the Pelicans. I mean, at a time when they really needed to make a move up, they have gone in the opposite direction. They were 14-14, and now they're 17-21. So if you do the math, you'll find that's 3-7 in their last 10. They managed to have a positive point differential, even though they're down in the 14 slot in the Western Conference. But if they have at least a marginally healthy Anthony Davis, and they're going to find themselves missing the playoffs by not an insignificant amount, he's not going to stick around for that. And where we were talking about, or I mentioned, I don't think that moving on from grit and grind is the end of basketball in Memphis. If they trade away Anthony Davis and they don't do it effectively and turn it into the foundation of a new and better team, I mean, this is one of the best handful of players in the league, and people don't come out for it. People aren't interested. They don't play well. It's just a disaster. So they need to turn this around, or New Orleans Pelicans basketball is not going to be happening in the near future.
I'm pretty much right there with you again, Jeremy. Anthony Davis is a once-in-a-generation type player. We don't see guys like him every day. And obviously, with how the Pelicans have played after their really hot start, Drew Holiday is still extremely good, I think. And I love what Randall's given them and Miracek. But this team just can't seem to get out of its own way. And obviously, with all the rumors swirling, the dinner dates with LeBron and everything else, there's becoming a more and more tension and probably concern within Pelicans brass, even though they probably wouldn't come out and publicly say that Anthony Davis will eventually leave ship if they don't get this right. So I agree. is trying to better this roster and trying to get back into the playoffs, because obviously they had so much success last year sweeping the Blazers and getting to the second round that if this team doesn't duplicate that, then this is an absolute failure.
Do you guys think that they will get back into the playoffs, or it's going to be an unsuccessful season in New Orleans?
It's a tough call. I mean, it's hard for me to think that, a healthy Anthony Davis is going to, sit this one out. Last year, of course, DeMarcus Cousins gets injured, and, Davis just throws the team on his back and goes on a supernova run. His stats were off the chart, in the aftermath of the DeMarcus Cousins injury. And, a team that was at the time of the injury, kind of I think they were on the outside looking in of the playoff picture, and then he went and catapulted them up to the 6 seed, and they sweep the 3 seed. He really carried the team. I don't think he's the type to pack it in, but you also have to make a real determination that I am going to carry this team down to the playoffs right now. And will he do that if he's looking at the situation and saying, why am I going to kill myself when what I really want is to get out of town and get to a better situation? So last year, being a little further away and having the unique situation of, this like Twin Towers, deal, and then you lose, your partner in crime, and you don't really have a choice. I think now it's looking a little more choicey in terms of, will he make that effort, or will he just say, why am I killing myself? Like, I want to get out of here.
Will the Pelicans make the playoffs? As of right now, with how the roster stands, I'm probably going to say no. I mean, there's literally 14 teams in the West competing for a playoff spot. So teams that probably should be in the playoffs are going to miss the playoffs, just kind of how it's going to go this year. And I just can't see the Pelicans right now making the playoffs. I just haven't been impressed with anything they've done this last month or so. Third in offensive rating, but they're 25th in defensive rating. So for me, they got to get their defense right. Anthony Davis needs to continue to carry this team. And Jeremy made a good point. At one point in time when you're losing and you're playing your ass off, do you eventually say, yeah, this isn't for me anymore?
Yeah, it's definitely going to be an interesting season in New Orleans and what happens, obviously, moving forward as well. On to the next division, though, Los Angeles Lakers.
Well, I think the Lakers need to use this time where LeBron is out to really, showcase Brandon Ingram and then trade him. Because I think it's become very clear, and it's clear when you watch, the games being played, and you see what's going on, out on the floor, that Ingram and LeBron are not compatible, and as a result, they need to get what they can for him. I think in some ways it ends up being kind of fortuitous, in that LeBron goes out a little bit now. Everything goes through Ingram, and I mean, for instance, he was terrific last night. 21 points, 7 rebounds, 9 assists. Plus 16, a real asset on the floor. And he demonstrates that when LeBron's not there. But obviously LeBron is the centerpiece of this franchise. So, they need to remind everyone of how good he is, he being Ingram, in this time. And then, when his value is at its peak, then off he goes, for, a second star around Mr. James.
Yeah, my resolution is similar. I'm not sure if it's Ingram, but it's moving some sort of piece to get a bigger piece alongside LeBron James. I still think free agency is where you want to attack, more aggressively. But I think if you can make a somewhat of a smaller move, maybe to move some of these younger guys who may be even peaking in potential, sell them off, get some kind of win now talent, because the Lakers really – they're really not that far off. At least they've shown glimpses that they're not that far off. And of course, anytime you have LeBron James, we mentioned this on a couple episodes ago, the NBA Outlet. Whenever you have LeBron James, especially with how old he is, I mean, you are playing at the highest level for the biggest stage, which is the NBA Finals. And I think you don't want to waste any time with LeBron James, even though I know it's a 4-year window because he signed the 4-year deal. Year 4 is not going to look better than year 1 or year 2. So I think it's getting another big piece, whoever it is, to help attract a free agent and to help win now.
Yeah, it's definitely developing Ingram and kind of showcasing him to allow you to bring another free agent in. But like I've said in the past, I am not completely opposed to them just sitting on it, waiting to the offseason because of salary cap reasons, where they can kind of maneuver things a little bit easy. But we'll see what happens. I know obviously Corey's brought up LeBron's age a couple times, which is a concern as well. Over to the Clippers, somewhat still the forgotten team in LA, but having a better year.
Yeah, the Clippers, I think, are having the perfect year for them. So, I think their resolution is kind of to stay the course here, which may seem strange for, a team that, so, while having a good year is still, in the middle of the West, the playoff picture at least, they're the fourth seed. If playoffs started today, they, be playing at home. But I don't think anybody has any real plans for them in terms of, it's like, oh, watch out for the Clippers in the playoffs. I think they're a deep team. And because they are a deep team, they're well suited for the regular season in terms of that, those kind of schedule losses where other teams just are spent and don't have, the firepower for it. The Clippers can come in waves and just, stay with teams that they shouldn't, have any business doing. And then ultimately, just eking out some wins where other teams, take, kind of those schedule losses, not 4 games in 5 nights. I don't think they do that anymore, but the same kind of, modern day equivalent of that. But, they want to show that they are a well organized, competitive, franchise, so that when the offseason comes around and you have some stars looking for a place to play, they can put themselves out and say, everybody loves Los Angeles. Come here, run your own team, and look at the infrastructure in terms of professional, hard playing people around you. So I think the Clippers are doing exactly what they need to do this year. It's setting up for what's going to be perhaps the biggest and most important offseason in their franchise, potentially history, coming up this summer.
I'm right there with you, Jeremy. Keep pretty much copy and paste. Stay the course. You've had a very good year so far. You have a lot of guys who look like they can be a number 2 or a number 3 option alongside of a superstar, Durant or Kawhi Leonard, which obviously are going to be their big targets this offseason. So for me, I'm right there with you. Just keep playing hard, tough-nosed basketball. Maybe go deep in the first round playoff matchup and then try and bring in a star this offseason.
Do you guys think that they'll land one of the big free agents this summer?
I do. I don't know if I was going to choose between the two, I'd say Kawhi. I think Kawhi to the Clippers is has a lot of legs to it. I think it may make at least the same amount of sense as it does for Durant. But I think Durant may have other things that he's thinking about. I just feel like there's a lot of this like Durant to the Knicks business out there. But I think for someone like Kawhi, where you have a team in LA, it's veteran coach in Doc Rivers. You have Jerry West there. So you have a lot of really respected basketball people. And a team that he could slot right into and take the next level in the same way that he slotted into Toronto and help them take the leap. But instead, it's where he actually wants to be in terms of Los Angeles. I think Kawhi to the Clippers is I think there's a lot of legs there.
Personally, I'm leaning towards no. If I had to say which superstar would be there, I side with you, Jeremy, on Kawhi Leonard. All the rumors that his ties to LA. I think I've even seen that he was more of a Clippers fan growing up than a Lakers fan. Which obviously, if you're a Clippers fan, you're gonna love to hear that. But realistically, I just don't think so. I think both these guys can find better win now situations for them. But again, it depends on what they're both looking for. If Durant really wants the best chance to win, it's probably staying in Golden State. If he wants to fix his legacy, maybe a place like the Clippers makes sense. A team that's never won an NBA title. And then for Kawhi, I don't even know how you can gauge Kawhi at this point because it feels like it kind of feels like he's enjoying his time in Toronto, but at the same time, he's keeping the door wide open that he can go anywhere this offseason. So I don't know. I think the Raptors probably need to make a deep playoff run to keep Kawhi.
Well, talking KD, what about the Warriors? What are they looking to do in 2019?
I think they need to make sure that they properly integrate DeMarcus Cousins when he comes off, the injured list there. This is not a deep team. They have of the kind of masthead there in terms of Curry and Durant, Thompson and Draymond Green. But after that, this is not a good team. I mean, Iguodala, according to Mark Jackson, is going to get his jersey in the rafters. But, Sean Livingston, is maybe the sixth man. They've obviously been picking at the bottom of the first, a few years running now. But they're not getting anything from those picks. I mean, other teams have gotten, success into the 20s. And Looney is, not that great. I mean, I know that we had an article out recently about, how Looney plus the starting four is a good rotation for them. But I mean, he's not that great. Bell's not that great. Patrick McCaw, they botched that situation. He just left. It's just, they really need DeMarcus Cousins, I think, to come back and be a big piece for them because, as good as that top four is, the rest of the roster is kind of in tatters as far as I can see.
See, I'm pretty close with you on this too, Jeremy, about the DeMarcus Cousins being integrated in. But for me, it's a different side of it. For me, it's the energy and maybe the fact that DeMarcus Cousins can flip the script for this Warriors team. Because I'm not sure it's necessarily a talent issue. I think it's more of an energy and focus and being locked in. Obviously, Durant, Curry, Thompson, Draymond, all those guys have won titles. Cousins is the one guy who hasn't won a title. And when Durant first came in, I felt like they had some extra juice to try and give Durant his first title and everything else that came with that. I think Cousins could have, or they at least need him to have that kind of effect where the fact that he wants to win so badly just kind of inspires the guys around him to start playing well. But, of course, that all comes with, as you mentioned, him being integrated properly.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting situation. Obviously, I think some of it is just motivation, like we've mentioned in the past for the Warriors and kind of getting back to that level we've seen in the past. On to the Phoenix Suns. I'm assuming this one's going to be pretty similar to Orlando.
I mean, they do need some distribution from the point guard position. Although I'm kind of curious about Point Booker. I'm interested to see if they can really successfully convert him to kind of a James Harden-esque player in terms of someone who can really be the fulcrum of the team, and from there really be the engine of what makes it go, and not just a player who can score well, but a player who can really run a team and be the focal point there. So I think that's something worth figuring out, but. I think they just need to, kind of stay the course, play the kids. They have some, really, good, interesting players there who are young. Obviously, Ayton, the first overall pick. I think, his stats have been pretty good, but. I think he still has a way to go in terms of understanding the best way, to play in the league. Mikal Bridges is a good player for them. I think Kelly Oubre has played well since he came over, even though he's been in the league for a while. He's just 23. But, they also need to, figure out what they have in some other younger pieces. Is TJ Warren part of the big picture? Is Josh Jackson part of the picture? They need to make some determinations because they've been picking high for so long that they're starting to have redundancy in terms of a number of young players and not enough minutes for them that they need to make the call, and either invest or cut bait. Marquise Chris obviously out the door. Dragon Bender, they're only giving him 8 minutes a game. Are you done with him? He's a number 4 overall pick. But they need to make determinations about players and get some value out of them before it no longer exists.
Yeah, I think right there with you on the Suns. It's first off finding a point guard, of course, and then just figuring out which one of these young guys you kind of want on this roster going forward. I think TJ Warren would be a Phoenix Sun I kind of expect to see on the move this year. He's having some career years. He's actually shooting the three ball better than he has in his entire career. So he's probably got some value. And I'm not sure if he's really a part of this team long forward. Obviously, they just drafted Bridges, and you still have Josh Jackson for, I don't know what they see in Josh Jackson necessarily at this point in time. He's had kind of a rough sophomore year. But for me, I think it's getting some more talent specifically at the point guard position and probably moving TJ Warren.
Yeah, definitely figuring out what you have on the roster, and then, like you guys said, maybe bring in that point guard or a playmaker of some type. Sacramento Kings, another surprising team this year who's right in the playoff picture, and that's not something we expected to say going into 2019.
Well, I think that they need to also kind of streamline their roster a bit. I mean, they've gotten some really good years out of a number of players. Obviously, De'Aaron Fox has made the leap for them. I think Willie Cauley-Stein, has finally indicated that he, is not just, a basketball player, but a good basketball player. Buddy Hield, even though he's older than we thought he was, has demonstrated that he, is a very good shooter and scorer, and a big piece of the puzzle there. They have a lot of guys on the team, and I don't think they have enough minutes for them all to go around. So you run the risk of somebody like Scal Labissiere, losing his value and crashing out of the league there. So I would see what they could do to turn some of those pieces together into a bigger piece. And I mentioned maybe Miami going for Andrew Wiggins. I think Sacramento would do well to go for like an Andrew Wiggins, or a player of that type, has a big contract but still has some promise, and maybe is in need of a new situation where you could talk to a Timberwolves and say, here are a few still young, interesting pieces. We just don't have time for all of them. Maybe you make time for them, and we get back, a player with a higher kind of star profile. So I think that that's the sort of thing that they want to do, because I don't think that they're going to be able to keep pace with the playoff picture in the West. So they should, make sure that they're not, I think squandering their assets in terms of, decreasing their value, because they just can't play them all.
Another name to think about, Otto Porter Jr. They had some interest in him the previous offseason before he signed that big contract. But Kory, what are your thoughts on the Kings?
I mean, first, I really enjoy the Sacramento Kings team, which I don't think I'd ever thought I'd say heading into 2019, but it's a fact. I enjoy watching this team play. Buddy Hield, De'Aaron Fox, Bogdan Bogdanovic, Willie Cauley-Stein, Marvin Bagley. Amon Shumpert's had a nice year. There's some really nice pieces on this team, as Jeremy just mentioned. They don't have their draft pick, right? The Celtics have it.
Yeah, they don't have,
or the Sixers, one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. Okay. So for me, not having your draft pick, having these guys playing so well, continue to play hard. Continue to push for a playoff spot. Maybe kind of deal some of these lower guys. Maybe Justin Jackson. I don't know, Harry Giles, even maybe some of these younger guys who maybe you don't need, because as you mentioned, Jeremy, there's so many guys in this roster. There's just not enough minutes to go around. So I would probably try and move some guys, push for a playoff seed, because why not? And who knows? Maybe you make a move with some of these younger guys, and some sort of vet sees that and wants to go. I mean, they did just come off an offseason the year prior where they got George Hill, Vince Carter, and Zach Randolph. Obviously, a lot of those guys are going after the big contracts, but this is a place that maybe with this young talent, they can actually start to bring in some bigger name free agents.
Yeah, definitely a lot of promise, too, with all the young guys, like you said, Kory. And it's weird. You didn't expect to see the Kings being an exciting team to watch for a long time, and it's finally come. I'm sure Kings fans are very happy about it. On to the last division, though, Portland Trail Blazers.
I think the Portland Trailblazers need to give this backcourt one last swing, and then break it up if they can't get over the hump this year in the playoffs. I think they need to support this current team. I mean, there's always, I think, that cry, separate Lillard and McCollum, and see what you can get for one of the two of them. But this is in some ways a advanced backcourt, in terms of looking to see where the NBA is headed, having multiple creators, multiple guys who can, score, but also distribute. I mean, they were ahead of the curve, in terms of that kind of paradigm. But being advanced is no consolation if you're a 3 seed and then you get swept out by the 6. So I don't think that they should be rash or imprudent in terms of trying to break up this just for the sake of breaking it up, when I think that the league is heading where they are, which is a perimeter oriented team. But if you're also not getting out of the first round, and not just not getting out of the first round, but getting swept out of the first round, if they don't make it happen this year, then they need to recognize that changes at last will have to be made.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the level of patience probably in Portland's got to be dwindling. Obviously, they've had some solid years. I always think back to a couple years ago when they beat the Rockets and Lillard hit that game-winning shot. Obviously, that roster is completely different now because they have Batum, Wesley Matthews, Robin Lopez, and Marcus Aldridge back then. But McCollum and Lillard, obviously, we know they're explosive, but they really just, as you mentioned, Jeremy, they haven't been able to get it done. I would love to see this team try and make a move. There's just not a lot of talent. Lillard averages 26, McCollum 21, then Nurkic averages 14, and everyone else is under single digits. I would love to see if they could somehow get rid of Evan Turner. That has to be the worst decision they made over the last 4 years, was signing Evan Turner to that $17 million, basically $18 million contract a year, $18 million a year contract. Excuse me. So for me, I would try and move some of these guys to bring in some more talent, but realistically, there's just not much they can do with how cap struck they are.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No,
Jeremy.
I was just going to say, that a 30 for 30 wouldn't cover, that summer of cap spike where so many teams made such awful decisions because did they not understand that money rolls over? I don't know. I mean, is there a team outside of Golden State, which of course used that spike to get Kevin Durant, but is there a team outside of Golden State that is happy with the way that they spent their money that summer? I don't think so. I mean, it's just brutal on every front. And as it was happening, I felt like any objective, NBA observer was kind of like, why? That person's not worth that money. Why are you doing that? And it just one after another, people made bad choice after bad choice. The Evan Turner contract is up there. I mean, he's an Ohio State graduate, and so I have fondness for Evan Turner. I remember when he was the Player of the Year, so I know what he can do. But he's just, he's a player who's in need of a unique circumstance. In terms of really running the entire offense through him, and if he doesn't get that, then his efficacy really dwindles. So Evan Turner is way overpaid at that amount. He could be put into a situation where he could be a worthwhile basketball player again, but he is not in that situation right now.
So not even just that. I mean, they matched the Allen Crabbe offer sheet. They ended up getting rid of that, but then they end up taking another bad contract, which they waived. And Myers Leonard's contract isn't great either. So it just hasn't been a ton of great contracts over in Portland. That's really hurt them because their supporting cast has just been super inconsistent the whole pretty much Dame and CJ era.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I would love Evan Turner on this roster if it was for $8 million and not $18 million. Because I do like his role off the bench, and he is, as you mentioned, Jeremy, he can run an offense and run a show. It's just too much money to have locked into a guy who shoots 12% from three.
Yeah, especially in this NBA. Moving on to OKC.
I think the OKC resolution needs to be to convince Russell Westbrook to stop shooting threes.
Good luck.
Good luck. But it's a really good team this year. Just finished putting out an article about this is not the usual OKC team that we've been accustomed to since Durant left, where the sun is Russell Westbrook and everything else is fortunate to orbit around it. It's not that team. You have a lot of players who are playing their absolute best. Paul George is on that list. So is Steven Adams. So is Jeremy Grant. Dennis Schroeder has been really good. This team is not dependent, on Russell Westbrook, bricking, 76%, let's do it the other way, of his 3-pointers, in order to be good. I mean, he is a great player. And this is the hands down worst part of his game, that he doesn't have the awareness to, make a different choice there, is surprising, honestly, in some ways. But if they could just convince him, to focus on the components of his game that he is good at, which are many, he would take this team to an even better place. But to be, shooting almost 5 threes a game and making, one, just over one, that's not sustainable. And that's something that's going to really hurt this team in the long run.
Can I just say that I think we should always talk about how, like, the percentage in which the guys miss shots. So like, Russell Westbrook shooting or missing 64% of his shots, I think would be a nice little stat to have. But I'm right there with you, Jeremy. It's more so not just Westbrook, but this team as a whole. What is this, the worst 3-point shooting team in the league still? Yeah, 32%. they need help on the perimeter. Obviously, this is one of the best defensive teams in the league. I think they still are the best defensive rating team, which they are. Paul George, you mentioned career year. I think Dennis Schroeder's been really good for them too, despite his shooting numbers. But for me, it's you got to add 3-point shooting. Defense does win championships, but if you can't score a boatload of points and attack other teams from deep, you're probably just not going to go deep into playoffs. And that's the one thing the Thunder need to address.
Yeah, it feels like it's been pretty constant for the Thunder too, needing 3-point shooting the last few seasons, or at least 3-point shooters they can play on the floor that aren't going to get embarrassed defensively. But on to the Denver Nuggets.
Denver Nuggets need to get healthy. I mean, it is, a small miracle is hyperbole, but that the Denver Nuggets are leading the West right now is really crazy. I mean, they have lost. I wish I knew exactly how many games they've lost to injury. That would be a nice stat. But
A lot.
it's a lot. I mean, Will Barton has played, just 2 games. Now, Gary Harris is on the shelf. He's, their second or third best player. Paul Millsap, is out. And they're getting, legitimate, contributions from, and I've also written about it, because these are former first-round picks. Juan Hernan Gomez is a former first-round pick. Malik Beasley is a former first-round pick. So is, Trey Lyles. So it's not that they're people with absolutely no pedigree, but they're not people that they expected, I think, in the Mile High City, to be, starting. Not just in spot places, but consistently, over the course of the year. I mean, they've had to throw 23 starts to Torrey Craig. They've been fortunate that Monte Morris has turned out to be as good as he has. But, these are not people that you would think are playing a part in the, best team in the West. Jamal Murray, I think, has taken another jump as I thought he might. Nikola Jokic has certainly indicated that he is a superstar in this league. So, there are some big people who are doing the things that you expect of them. But from, after the 2 of them, it's a lot of players that you didn't know if you had anything. And it turns out that they have a great deal. So if they can just get healthy and get those big names and those big pieces back, I mean, this could be a really dangerous team, when you talk about who they could have, coming off the bench, who would have had extensive starting experience, after the injuries they've faced thus far this year.
Yeah, I'm right there with Jeremy. It's getting healthy. We mentioned this a lot in the NBA outlet the last couple of weeks. They're missing basically a starting 5 of talent on their roster between Will Barton, Isaiah Thomas, Michael Porter Jr., Paul Millsap, Gary Harris. And obviously this team is still a top team in the West. And once they get these guys back, I just think they're going to continue to build some momentum. But for me, it's just getting healthy.
Yeah, obviously, when you have that many injuries, you're hoping they can be healthy. It's crazy they've been able to maintain their spot in the West, too. Utah Jazz, a team that's not maintained their spot and looked pretty bad, most of the season compared to what we expected from them.
They need to look back at this precise time last year and bottle that and then, take it with them wherever they go. Because last year, after the new year, they went 32-13 in order to make a run from, 16-21 when they came into 2018 to 48-34 and making the playoffs. 32-13 is a tough run to go on, but it's the sort of thing that they're going to need to do because right now they are out of the playoffs and looking up at a number of good teams. They're not just behind Sacramento anymore. I mean, now the Spurs have sorted themselves out a little bit, as have the Rockets. You have the Lakers, you have the Clippers, you have the Trailblazers. I mean, these are not suspect teams in the playoff race. These are all very good teams, and if Utah doesn't figure out what they need to do to make a run, then they're going to find themselves on the outside looking in of a season that they entered with a lot of optimism.
Yeah, I missed the Utah Jazz team we had possibly being as high as the 2 seed in the West, coming off the momentum they had last year in the defense. They've been disappointing. I think without a doubt, 18-19 is not where I thought they'd be at this point in the season. Donovan Mitchell has been very unimpressive. So my resolution for this team, which I think I mentioned before, is adding more talent, some sort of offense. It just feels like too many nights. They don't have a guy they can go get a bucket from. And it was Donovan Mitchell last year, but when Donovan Mitchell was not being an effective scorer, then their next best option is Joe Ingles or Ricky Rubio. And Joe Ingles, I think, is very good, but you can't rely on him to be the sole source of your offense. And obviously, Ricky Rubio can't really shoot. So for me, it's adding some talent, trying to flip Derek Favors into some 3-point shooting would probably be ideal for this team. But yeah, it's not looking good for them. And as of right now, I probably wouldn't have them in the playoffs.
Yeah, definitely some roster changes are going to happen for them to improve that offense. Last team of the day, Minnesota Timberwolves.
Well, of course, sent Andrew Wiggins to a few different teams at this point. So I clearly want him out of Minnesota. I think that needs to be their number one maneuver there, because he's not getting the job done, overall, but certainly for, what they're paying him. And I think that Minnesota, in as much as I think they did a pretty good job in terms of what they got for Butler. I like Sarge, I like Rocco. I think that those are, good players. I think that, obviously, where they are right now, they're in the 13 spot. I don't think that they're going to be able to climb up, into the playoffs with the roster that they've, currently, constituted. Then, they need to move on. And I think, people like Sarge and Covington may have, greater trade value. But at the same time, I think that that's because they're players that Minnesota should want to hang on to. Whereas, Wiggins, really at no point has demonstrated himself to be, somebody who's a piece of a winning puzzle. So if they can, move on from him and perhaps in concert with some other moves, then they would be wise to do so.
And my resolution is it's around Wiggins, but for me, it's just getting more production. Being more efficient. Obviously, I'm not giving up yet, but obviously Wiggins hasn't been that good. He kind of falls out. There's some nights where he looks like he's going to be an all-star in this league. And there's other nights where you wonder how the hell he's in the league. So for me, it's Andrew Wiggins finding some consistency, becoming that second option on this team. And along with that, it would probably be Jeff Teague finding some offensive consistency, because despite averaging 11 and 8, this guy is shooting 38 and 31 from the field. And he's being vastly outplayed by Derrick Rose.
Yeah, and I know fans have even called for Tyus Jones to get more minutes over him as well. What do you guys think is going to happen with Wiggins before we get out of here? Is he going to ever find it, or is he going to be one of these in-between players, kind of like a Jeff Green, where there's always like the hope he'll turn into a good player, but he never really does? Not to say Jeff Green's bad, but he's just, a bench player that's inconsistent.
It's more on the Jeff Green, I think, trajectory right now than a sorting it out trajectory. Wiggins has really all of the athletic gifts in the world, and he just, he doesn't do anything with them. I mean, I think Jimmy Butler arriving on the scene was not a good, turn of events for him. I mean, when he was 21 in the 16-17 season, that was his best year. He was averaging almost 24 points. He had 4 rebounds, a little over 2 assists. He was shooting pretty well. He'd been over 35% from 3. Everything was trending upward. And then Jimmy Butler comes in. He takes touches. He takes attention. He drops down under 18 points a game. And this year now he's down under 17 points a game. He's back to looking like a rookie in terms of his production. If not his level of basketball understanding. So it's not a good look for him, right now, to think that he, if you look at his stat line, he peaked at his age 21 season. But I don't think that he's peaked. At the same time, he's not heading in the right direction. And I don't know what's supposed to happen in Minnesota for him to do it. I mean, with Karl-Anthony Towns, and I did a deep dive on Karl-Anthony Towns, and how Jimmy Butler influenced him. And, just within this season, it was, when Jimmy Butler is on the floor with him, he's not playing well. When Jimmy Butler's out the door, he's back to being the Karl-Anthony Towns we know and love. So, I don't worry about Karl-Anthony Towns, refinding, his mojo. But with Wiggins, the optimism is just not there.
I mean, I hate writing off a 23-year-old. But obviously, there's a lack of effort at times. It was enough to drive Jimmy Butler insane and demand to get out of there. Obviously, Towns was a big part of that too. I still think Wiggins is going to figure this out. For some reason, I still do. That's really all I got. I'm not over Wiggins. I think Wiggins is going to be a part of this team going forward. Obviously, the contract's not very movable. and his value isn't high for him to, garner a lot of assets. But I still have faith in Wiggins. I still see enough raw potential there, and that I'm not going to write him off probably till he's like 25. He's 23. I got to give him a couple more years just to get his stuff together. Obviously, it was also kind of weird for him because his role changed a lot more from Jimmy Butler coming in than Towns did. It was Towns and then Wiggins, and then it became, Butler, Towns, Wiggins. And now Wiggins is coming back into that second role, but really he's not the second role because Derrick Rose has been so good. So then it's Towns, Rose, Wiggins. So I think for Wiggins, he's just always kind of had a weird fit. And I'm not sure if he figures it out in Minnesota. I sure hope he does, but I'm not ready to throw in the towel yet.
I think for him to figure it out, to have any chance of figuring out, would be scenery change as well as a really good head coach. Somebody who has a great player development staff that's going to be able to get the best out of him and make him take his game to the next level. If not, I could see him, like I said, having some of that Jeff Green type role. But guys, excellent job. New Year's resolutions for every single team. Thanks to Jeremy and Kory. Any final thoughts before we get out of here?
I'm really excited about 2019. Seeing where these, especially the playoff race in the West, seeing how that shakes out. They're starting to gain a little separation as the calendar flips over, but there's still a lot still to be sorted. Some teams that are outside looking in, and I think that we're coming up on what's going to be a really, really interesting trade deadline. I think there's going to be a lot of action. I'm really excited for the OTG coverage of it, and I think there's going to be some really exciting, not just basketball on the court, but the discussion of basketball off the court. And I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, a lot of people say that Christmas Day is the start of the NBA season. And it certainly feels like it's gearing up that way. Obviously, football is winding down. I'm really excited for how this rest of the season plays out. Excited to see what the Pacers can do. And I'm excited for all the awesome stuff we got planned at OTG. So stay with us.
Exactly. It should be a big season. Like Jeremy said, trade deadline is going to be fun. It seems like it's better every year. A lot of competition in both conferences for the playoffs, so that should be fun. And like you guys mentioned, OTG has a lot of things coming in 2019. Appreciate all the support, all the listeners on every aspect of it. And check us out, iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, OTGbasketball.com, Dash Radio, and YouTube.